Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku awakened the celestial Runeforge. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not built on equality. It is built on power, on genetics, and on the cruel, indifferent roll of the cosmic dice. Izuku Midoriya learned this truth at the tender age of 4. It wasn't a lesson taught with kindness or patience. It was a lesson delivered in the sterile white of a doctor's office, accompanied by the clicking of an X-ray light box and the crushing weight of a mother's tears. "You should probably give it up, kid." Those words had echoed in the hollow chambers of his chest for 10 years. They had become the background radiation of his life, a constant hum of inadequacy that vibrated through his bones every time he saw a hero soar through the sky, or watched fire burst from his father's fingers in old home videos, or felt the stinging heat of an explosion against his shoulder. Quirkless. The word was more than a medical diagnosis. It was a social sentence. It meant he was a relic, an evolutionary dead end, a glitch in the source code of a superhuman society. In a world where 80% of the population possessed some form of uncanny ability, being normal was synonymous with being broken. Aldera Junior High, 3 p.m. The heat of the afternoon sun pressed against the windows of the classroom, baking the air inside until it shimmered. The droning voice of the teacher was barely audible over the cacophony of cicadas crying out their brief, desperate lives outside. Izuku sat hunched over his desk, his posture a practiced attempt at invisibility. If he made himself small enough, if he compressed his existence into the molecular space between the atoms of the wooden desk, maybe the universe would forget he was there. "Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your futures," the teacher said, shuffling a stack of papers. He tossed them into the air with a dramatic flair that Izuku found exhausting. "I would hand out these career aptitude tests, but why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero track." The classroom exploded. It was a chaotic symphony of quirks, hands turning into rocks, eyes extending on stalks, telekinetic waves rattling pencils. It was a display of uniqueness, a celebration of potential, except for Izuku. He kept his head down, his hand trembling slightly as he gripped his pen. Yes, you've all got wonderful quirks," the teacher said, waving a hand dismissively. "But using your powers in school is against the rules. Settle down." "Hey, teach!" The voice cut through the noise like a serrated blade. It was arrogant, rough, and undeniably commanding. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet propped up on his desk, leaning back with a casual disrespect that only the truly gifted could afford. "Don't lump me in with these extras. Comparing me to this bunch of losers is an insult. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal." The class erupted in outrage, shouts of "Get over yourself, Katsuki!" filling the air. "Shut up, extras!" Bakugo roared, tiny explosions popping in his palms like gunfire. "I'm aiming for the top. I'm going to be the only student from this dump to make it into UA High. I'll surpass All Might and become the richest, most famous hero of all time." He stood up, creating a shockwave of presence that silenced the room. He was undeniable. He was a force of nature. "Oh, that's right," the teacher mused, glancing at his clipboard. "Midoriya wanted to go to UA too, didn't he?" The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of respect, it was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Then, the laughter started. It began as a titter, a snicker from the back, and then swelled into a roar. "Midoriya? No way! You can't get into the hero course with just studying. He's quirkless. They'd shred him in the entrance exam." Izuku stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. His face burned with a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. "That's not... They got rid of that rule. There's no precedent, sure, but..." Boom! Izuku didn't even see Bakugo move. 1 second the blonde was at his desk, the next he was in front of Izuku, slamming a hand onto Izuku's desk with an explosion that sent Izuku tumbling backward onto the floor. "Deku!" Bakugo growled, smoke curling from his palm. His red eyes were narrowed, glowing with a mix of malice and genuine confusion. "You're worse than the rest of these rejects, you quirkless wannabe. You think you can stand in the same ring as me?" Izuku scrambled back, his back hitting the chalkboard. "No! Wait, Kaken! I'm not trying to compete with you. I swear! He held his hands up, palms open, defenseless. It's been my dream since I was little. And well, I won't know unless I try. Unless you try? Bakugo loomed over him, his shadow swallowing Izuku whole. Smoke drifted from his fingers, smelling of burnt caramel and danger. What can you do? You're nothing. You're a pebble on the side of the road. Are you taking the entrance exam just to embarrass yourself? The class watched, their laughter dying down into a cruel amusement. This was the natural order of Aldera Junior High. The strong devoured the weak, and Izuku was the weakest of them all. The courtyard, 3:30 p.m. Izuku packed his bag quickly, desperate to leave before the second wave of torment began. He clutched his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13, to his chest like a shield. It was his pride and joy, a compendium of every hero he had ever watched, detailed notes on their strengths, weaknesses, and special moves. It was the only thing that made him feel like he was preparing for something. We're not done talking, Deku. Izuku froze. Bakugo stood in the doorway, flanked by his two lackeys. Keikaken, Izuku stammered. Bakugo walked over and snatched the notebook from Izuku's hands. He looked at the cover, his lip curling in disgust. Hero Analysis for the Future? Seriously? Give it back! Izuku reached for it, but Bakugo held it out of reach. He's delusional, one of the lackeys laughed. Bakugo didn't laugh. He just stared at the book, then at Izuku. With a sudden, violent motion, he clapped his hands around the notebook. Boom! The explosion charred the cover instantly, turning the edges into ash. Izuku gasped, horrified. That's mean. Izuku whispered, his voice trembling. Bakugo didn't stop there. He walked to the open window and tossed the smoking notebook out. Izuku watched in slow motion as his hard work, his dreams, fluttered down toward the koi pond below. Most top-tier heroes have stories about their school days, Bakugo said, his voice dangerously calm. I want my origin story to be perfect. I want to be the only one from this mediocre school to make it to UA. So, do me a favor, Deku. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. It was heavy, warm, and radiated a threat of violence. Don't apply to UA, nerd. Bakugo turned and walked away, his lackeys snickering behind him. But at the door, he paused. He looked back over his shoulder, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there might be another way. Izuku looked up, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building, Bakugo said, his voice echoing in the empty classroom. And pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Izuku stood frozen. The words hit him harder than any explosion. They bypassed his physical defenses and struck directly at the core of his being. Kill yourself? It was a suggestion. A command. A dismissal of his entire existence. Izuku turned, his fists clenched, trembling with a rage he didn't know how to express. But when he looked at the door, Bakugo was already gone. Stupid. Izuku choked out, the tears finally spilling over. If I actually jumped, that would be inciting suicide. Think before you speak, you jerk. The koi pond. The water was murky and green. The fish nibbled at the charred edges of the notebook, confusing the burnt paper for food. That's not fish food, you guys, Izuku mumbled, fishing the soggy book out of the water. He held it up. The ink was running, the pages were soaked, but the title was still legible. Hero Analysis. He stared at his reflection in the pond. Green hair, round face, freckles. Eyes that looked tired, defeated. Mom. He remembered the day of the diagnosis. He remembered sitting in front of the computer, watching All Might's debut video for the 1000th time. He remembered turning to his mother, pointing at the screen, and asking with tears in his eyes, "Can I be a hero too?" He remembered the way she had hugged him. Not with affirmation, not with "yes, you can," but with an apology. "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." That wasn't what he had needed to hear. He didn't need pity. He needed belief. "I can't just give up," Izuku whispered to the fish. He squeezed the water out of the notebook. "I have to try. Even if everyone else thinks it's impossible." He started the walk home, avoiding the main roads. He didn't want to see people. He didn't want to see the flashy quirks of the city. He wanted the shadows, the underpass. The tunnel was a concrete throat beneath the highway, cool and damp. Shadows clung to the curved walls, and the sound of traffic above was nothing but a distant rumble. It was a shortcut, a place where the city held its breath. Izuku walked, lost in thought. He tried to simulate a fight in his head. If I encounter a villain, I can't rely on power. I have to rely on tools. But what tools? I can't carry support gear legally. I need martial arts. I need a sound. A wet, squelching noise behind him. Izuku turned. The manhole cover a few meters away rattled and slid aside. From the darkness of the sewer, a mass of green sludge erupted like a geyser of toxic waste. It rose, swirling and coalescing, forming a pair of wide, manic eyes and a gaping maw filled with liquid teeth. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The sludge rasped, its voice sounding like mud sliding down a drain. Izuku froze. Fear, cold and sharp, spiked in his spine. A villain? Here? The sludge lunged. Izuku tried to run, but his legs were heavy, his reactions too slow. The fluid mass slammed into him, wrapping around his body like a wet blanket. It was cold, smelling of rot and sewage. Don't worry, kid, the villain hissed, the liquid forcing its way into Izuku's mouth and nose. I'm just going to take over your body. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. I can't breathe. Izuku clawed at the slime, but his fingers passed right through it. It was viscous, non-Newtonian. The harder he struggled, the tighter it seemed to grip him. You can't grab me, the villain laughed. I'm fluid. Thanks for the help. You're a real lifesaver. I didn't think he was in this city. He? All Might? The thought was a flicker of hope that was quickly snuffed out by the lack of oxygen. Izuku's vision began to blur. Black spots danced in his eyes. His lungs burned, screaming for air that wasn't there. Is this it? The thought drifted through his mind, strangely detached. Am I going to die here? In a sewer tunnel? After everything? After all the bullying? After the doctor told me I was broken? I never even got to try. His strength was fading. His arms fell to his sides. The darkness of the tunnel seemed to expand, swallowing the light. No. A spark ignited in the deepest recess of his mind. It wasn't a thought, it was an instinct. A primal refusal to cease existing. I don't want to die. The pressure in his chest increased. The villain's sludge was filling his throat. I want to save people. The darkness behind his eyes shifted. It wasn't just black anymore. It was vast. I want to be a hero. And then, the universe opened up. The celestial fugue. Time didn't stop. It shattered. One moment, Izuku was drowning in sludge. The next, he was standing in a void. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with the cold, majestic burning of a billion stars. He floated in the center of a cosmic nebula, colors of indigo, violet, and burning gold swirling around him. He looked down at his hands. They weren't flesh and blood anymore. They were blueprints, wireframes of blue light that traced the geometry of his existence. He could see everything. He didn't just see the stars, he understood them. He understood that a star was a furnace, a forge of elements. He saw the hydrogen fusing into helium, the carbon compressing into diamond, the iron dying in the heart of a supernova to be cast out into the void to make worlds. Everything is material, a voice whispered. It wasn't a voice from outside, it was the vibration of his own soul. Everything is waiting to be shaped. He looked at the sludge villain. In this realm, the villain wasn't a monster. He was a chaotic arrangement of molecules. Polymers. Water. Dirt. Toxin. A disorderly mess of bonds waiting to be broken. Izuku felt a heat in his chest. It wasn't the burning of asphyxiation. It was the roar of a bellows. You are not empty, Izuku Midoriya, the universe sang. You are the anvil. A sensation of weight materialized in his right hand. He curled his fingers, and the starlight rushed toward him, coalescing, hardening, forging itself into a shape. A handle, wrapped in leather made of nebular dust. A head, blocky and solid, shining with the density of a neutron star. A hammer. It was ethereal, glowing with a translucent blue light, buzzing with a hum that resonated with his heartbeat. Strike, the instinct commanded. The world is yours to reforge. The tunnel, reality. In the real world, the sludge villain paused. Something was wrong. The boy in his grasp had stopped struggling, which was expected. But then, the temperature in the tunnel spiked. It wasn't a gradual warming. It was an instant flash of dry, intense heat, like opening the door to a blast furnace. What the? The villain gurgled. Light began to bleed from the boy's skin. Not a quirk activation like fire or electricity. It was intricate. Glowing blue lines, like cracks in porcelain, began to race across Izuku's arms and neck. They formed geometric patterns, runes, that pulsed with a rhythmic thrumming sound. Dum, 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 like a heartbeat. Or a hammer striking metal. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The whites were gone, replaced by a deep, starry void, and his irises burned like blue suns. He didn't gasp for air. He didn't scream. His right hand, pinned against his side by the sludge, twitched. He made a grasping motion. Crack. The air pressure in the tunnel dropped instantly as a shockwave of blue energy erupted from Izuku's hand. In a flash of light that blinded the villain, a hammer appeared. It was massive, easily the size of a sledgehammer, but Izuku held it with one hand as if it weighed nothing. It was composed of translucent blue energy, etched with symbols that hurt the eyes to look at. What is th? The villain started to scream. Izuku didn't speak. He swung. He didn't swing at the villain's eyes or mouth. He swung the hammer inward, driving the head of the spectral weapon directly into the mass of sludge covering his own chest. Clang. The sound was impossible. It wasn't the sound of a weapon hitting liquid. It was the sound of a hammer striking a pristine anvil. A clear, ringing bell tone that vibrated through the concrete, shattering the windows of the nearby drainage pipes. The moment the hammer made contact with the sludge, the world bent. Izuku's mind, still processing the cosmic fugue, imposed the concept onto the reality of the villain. Liquid is chaotic. Solid is ordered. Rune stasis. A ripple of blue light exploded from the impact point. It raced through the villain's fluid body faster than nerve impulses. And no! I can't move! I can't! The sludge turned gray. Then it turned clear. Then it hardened. With a sound like a glacier cracking, the villain's entire liquid body transmuted. The viscosity dropped to zero. The molecular bonds locked into a crystalline lattice. In less than a second, the sludge villain was turned into a statue of solid, smoky glass. Izuku fell forward, the prison around him shattering into shards as he moved. He coughed, violently expelling the air from his lungs and sucking in a greedy breath of the tunnel's damp oxygen. He hit the ground on his hands and knees, retching. Around him, the villain lay in pieces, not dead, but immobilized, transformed into piles of jagged, vibrating crystal. The eyes of the villain, frozen in the glass, darted around in sheer terror. Izuku looked at his hands. The blue veins were fading, retreating beneath his skin. The hammer in his right hand flickered. It felt warm, comforting, like holding the hand of an old friend. What? Izuku rasped, his voice raw. What was that? He stared at the hammer. It was heavy now. The ethereal light dimmed, revealing a dark, metallic gray surface etched with glowing blue runes. Celestial Runeforge. The name appeared in his mind, not as a thought he generated, but as a label attached to the tool. He stood up, his legs shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving him dizzy. He looked at the crystallized villain. He had done that. He hadn't punched him away. He had rewritten him. Izuku whispered, a hysterical smile tugging at his lips. I have a quirk? A manhole cover flew into the air. Have no fear! A booming voice echoed through the tunnel, carrying a pressure that rivaled the cosmic presence Izuku had just felt. For I am here! All Might landed in a crouch, steam rising from his massive form. He was grinning, his presence radiating safety and power. He scanned the tunnel, ready for a fight. Now, villain! Prepare to. All Might froze. His blue eyes, usually shadowed in determination, widened. He saw the scattered shards of smoky glass. He saw the villain's face trapped in a crystal prism, terrified but alive. And standing in the center of the wreckage was a small, skinny boy in a middle school uniform. The boy was trembling, covered in grime, but floating around the boy were faint, glowing symbols. And in his hand, resting its head on the concrete, was a massive, intricately carved smithing hammer that seemed to hum with a low, celestial song. "Young man?" All Might said, his voice dropping its booming persona for a second of genuine confusion. "Did you do this?" Izuku looked up. He saw his idol, the symbol of peace, standing right there. Tears welled up in Izuku's eyes again. But they weren't tears of despair this time. "All Might," Izuku whispered. The hammer dissipated into motes of starlight. The exhaustion hit Izuku like a physical blow. His knees buckled. "Whoa there!" All Might moved with the speed of a bullet train, catching the boy before he hit the ground. As Izuku faded into unconsciousness, the last thing he felt was the strong grip of the number one hero, and the lingering, burning warmth of the forge in his chest. "I'm not empty," was his final thought before the darkness took him. "I'm a maker." Mustafa General Hospital, 6 p.m. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of a monitor. Izuku opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. Familiar. He had been here before, usually after particularly bad days with Kaken. "Izuku!" His mother's face appeared in his field of vision. Inko Midoriya was a fountain of tears, her hands hovering over him as if afraid to touch him. "Mom?" Izuku croaked. "Oh, thank goodness. You passed out. The police called, and they said a villain attacked you, and then All Might was there, and oh, my baby." She hugged him, weeping into his hospital gown. Izuku blinked, his memory rebooting. The tunnel. The sludge. The stars. The hammer. Was it a dream? He looked at his hand. It looked normal. No glowing veins. No hammer. "Mrs. Midoriya?" A doctor stepped into the room. It was Dr. Tsubasa, the same doctor who had diagnosed him as quirkless 10 years ago. He held a clipboard, his thick goggles obscuring his eyes. "Is he okay?" Inko asked, wiping her eyes. "Physically? He is exhausted," the doctor said, tapping his pen against the clipboard. "Severe caloric depletion. Whatever happened in that tunnel burned through his body's energy reserves like a wildfire." The doctor walked to the side of the bed and looked down at Izuku. "Izuku, do you remember what happened?" Izuku hesitated. I think I manifested a quirk." Inko froze. She looked at the doctor, terrified of getting her hopes up. "But you said he was quirkless." "The toe joint." "Yes," the doctor said, his voice thoughtful. "About that. We ran some new tests while he was unconscious. A genetic resequencing." He turned the clipboard around to show a complex chart of DNA strands. "It appears I was partially correct, and significantly wrong," the doctor admitted, though he didn't look particularly apologetic. "Izuku possesses the double-jointed toe associated with quirklessness. However, in rare cases, extremely rare, undocumented cases, this isn't a sign of absence. It's a sign of a lock." "A lock?" Izuku asked, sitting up. "Think of it as a biological safety seal," the doctor explained. "Some mutations are too volatile, too energy-consuming for a child's body to handle. If this quirk had manifested when you were 4, the energy draw would have likely killed you instantly. Your body sealed it away until you had the physical mass and the mental stress trigger to unlock it." The doctor leaned in close. "We analyzed the residual energy signature on your clothes. It's not standard emitter radiation. It's dense. Like heavy matter." He looked Izuku in the eye. "You aren't quirkless, Izuku. You are a late bloomer. And judging by the police report of the villain being turned into solid quartz, it's a mutation-class reality warper." Izuku stared at his hands. He felt the tears coming again. "I have a quirk?" "You do," the doctor confirmed. "Whatever broke that seal today, it changed your physiology. Your bone density has increased by 30% in the last 4 hours. Your metabolism is racing. You're going to need to eat a lot." Inko burst into fresh tears, hugging Izuku again. "Oh, Izuku! You can be a hero! You can do it!" Izuku hugged her back, burying his face in her shoulder. But his mind was already racing. Reality warper? No, that didn't feel right. He closed his eyes and focused. He sought that feeling again. The nebula. The furnace. He felt it. A hum in the back of his skull. It wasn't a weapon to be fired. It was a workshop waiting to be used. It's a forge, Izuku thought. I didn't just warp reality. I crafted it. 2 days later, the Midoriya apartment. The news was going crazy. The sludge incident was the talk of the town, mostly because All Might had resolved it, but there were whispers about the crystal villain. The police had hushed up the details of Izuku's involvement to protect a minor who used the quirk without a license, attributing the capture entirely to All Might. Izuku sat at his desk. A fresh notebook lay open in front of him. Title: Quirk Analysis Celestial Runeforge, tentative name. He held a pen, but he wasn't writing. He was concentrating. Come on, he whispered. Focus. He visualized the hammer. He remembered the weight. A blue vein pulsed on his wrist. A spark of light danced across his knuckles. Pop. A small, spectral hammer, no bigger than a tack hammer, flickered into existence in his hand. It hovered there, translucent and weak. Izuku gasped and dropped it. It vanished before it hit the desk. Okay, he panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. It takes stamina. A lot of stamina. He looked at the metal ruler on his desk. He summoned the tiny hammer again. This time, he gently tapped the ruler. Clink. He focused. Harden. Durable. Sharp. A tiny rune, no bigger than a grain of rice, etched itself onto the ruler. The cheap aluminum suddenly gleamed with a strange luster. Izuku picked up the ruler. It felt heavier. Sturdier. He took a pair of scissors and tried to scratch the ruler. The scissors glanced off, leaving no mark. In fact, the scissors dented. Izuku's eyes widened. I can upgrade things, he whispered. He looked around his room. He saw his All Might figures. His computer. His weights. And then, he looked at the calendar. UA entrance exam, 10 months. For the first time in his life, the date didn't fill him with dread. It filled him with purpose. He wasn't going to catch up to Bakugo. He wasn't going to catch up to All Might. He was going to build something entirely new. Izuku picked up the pen and wrote under the title. Step 1. I need materials. I need a workshop. He turned his head and looked out the window, toward the coast. Toward the illegal dumping ground that had become an eyesore for the entire city. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Mountains of scrap metal. Abandoned cars. Tires. Broken appliances. To anyone else, it was a garbage dump. To Izuku, seeing it with his new eyes that understood structure, potential, and matter, it looked different. It looked like a treasure trove. It looked like a smithy. Izuku smiled, a fierce, determined expression that he had never worn before. Time to get to work. The hunger was the first thing Izuku noticed. It wasn't the polite rumble of an empty stomach. It was a cavernous, aching void that felt as if a black hole had opened up behind his navel. Izuku sat at the dining table, staring at a mountain of rice that would have usually fed a family of 4. Beside it sat 3 grilled fish, a bowl of miso soup large enough to bathe in, and a stack of tamagoyaki. Izuku, honey? Is that enough? Inko Midoriya asked, her hands clasping and unclasping nervously. She looked at the empty pots on the stove. I can thaw the emergency chicken. It looks great, Mom. Thanks for the food, Izuku said, though his voice sounded deeper, raspy with a strange resonance. He picked up his chopsticks. He didn't just eat, he consumed. His metabolism, jump-started by the awakening of the celestial Runeforge, was running hot. Every cell in his body was screaming for carbon, for protein, for fuel to knit together the denser muscle fibers and heavier bones the doctor had predicted. As he chewed, his eyes drifted to his right hand. He wasn't summoning the hammer right now. Dr. Tsubasa had warned him that mana depletion, a term the doctor used hesitantly, lacking a medical equivalent, could lead to coma if he overdid it. But he could feel it. It was like a phantom limb, a heavy, comforting weight waiting in a subspace pocket, just an inch away from reality. Izuku, Inko said softly, sitting across from him. She watched him eat with a mixture of pride and lingering fear. About Yue. Izuku paused, a piece of fish halfway to his mouth. Yeah, the doctor said your quirk is powerful. But it takes a toll. She reached out, touching his hand. Her fingers felt light, fragile compared to the density of his own skin. Do you still want to go? You could study support technology. Or general studies. You don't have to fight. Izuku swallowed. He set the chopsticks down. The memory of the tunnel, the suffocating sludge, the darkness, and then the explosion of starlight, flashed through his mind. He remembered the feeling of the hammer striking the villain. It hadn't felt like violence. It had felt like correction. Like he was fixing a mistake in the world's design. I have to, Mom, Izuku said, his green eyes burning with a low, steady light. For 10 years, I thought I was empty. I thought I was useless. But I'm not. I have a forge inside me, and a forge is useless if it doesn't make anything. He clenched his fist. I'm going to UA. And I'm going to be a hero. Inko looked at him. She saw the trembling boy who used to hide behind her legs, but she also saw something new. A rigidity. A structural integrity that hadn't been there before. She sighed, a smile breaking through her worry. Okay. But if you pass out again, I'm grounding you until you're 30. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, the next morning, the smell hit him first. It was a complex bouquet of rotting seaweed, rusted iron, wet cardboard, and despair. Izuku stood at the top of the concrete stairs leading down to the sand, though sand was a generous term. The beach was a graveyard of civilization. Mountains of trash rose like jagged tumors from the coastline. Broken refrigerators, crushed cars, tires, mountains of plastic bottles, and scrap metal twisted into unrecognizable shapes. It was an eyesore. A public hazard. To Izuku Midoriya, looking through the lens of the Runeforge, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. His vision shifted. The blue wireframe overlay he had seen in the tunnel flickered into existence. He didn't just see trash. He saw composition. Oxidized iron Fe2O3, high-density polyethylene, copper wiring, gold filaments, rare earth magnets. It's free real estate, Izuku muttered, a manic grin spreading across his face. He walked down the stairs, his red sneakers crunching on broken glass. He was wearing a turquoise tracksuit he had dug out of his closet, baggy enough to allow movement, though he suspected it would be tight in a few months if his growth spurt continued. He approached a washing machine that was half buried in the sand. It was rusted, the door hanging off its hinges. Okay, Izuku said, taking a deep breath. Test 1. He closed his eyes and reached into the void. Manifest. The air pressure dropped. A hum, like a choir of tuning forks, vibrated the air. Blue sparks arced from his shoulder down to his right hand. Crack. The hammer appeared. It was heavy, the head glowing with the deep, angry blue of a welding arc. The handle, wrapped in what felt like leather but looked like nebula dust, gripped his palm with a friction that felt magnetic. Izuku hefted it. It was heavier than he remembered, or maybe he was just weaker than he had been during the adrenaline spike of the villain attack. Material conversion, he whispered, recalling the instinctual knowledge. I need to break it down to build it up. He swung. He didn't swing hard. He just let the weight of the hammer fall onto the top of the washing machine. Clang. The sound was pure. It wasn't the crunch of metal. It was a bell toll. Upon impact, the washing machine didn't crumple. It dissolved. For a split second, the appliance turned into a cloud of glowing blue voxels, floating in the air. The rust vanished, burned away as impurity. The plastic separated from the metal. The rubber hoses disintegrated into carbon dust. Then, the blue light snapped inward. Clack. Where the washing machine had been, there now sat a neat, perfect cube of silver metal, roughly the size of a shoebox. Beside it was a smaller cube of white plastic. Izuku stared at the ingots. He fell to his knees and picked up the metal cube. It was warm. It was heavy. It was perfectly smooth, free of rust or degradation. Refining, Izuku breathed. I can refine matter. He looked up at the endless mountains of trash stretching down the coastline. I can use this, he realized. I can't just buy titanium or tungsten. But there are tons of alloys here. If I refine them, combine them, I can make anything. He stood up. The hammer hummed in agreement. 10 months, Izuku said to the seagulls circling overhead. 10 months to clear this beach. 10 months to turn this garbage into an armory. He walked over to a rusted pickup truck. He raised the hammer. Let's get to work. 2 weeks later, the routine was brutal. School. Homework. Eat enough food to feed a linebacker. Run to the beach. Forge until his arms felt like jelly and his nose bled from mana exhaustion. Sleep. Repeat. Izuku quickly learned the limitations of his quirk. First, mass conservation. He couldn't create matter from nothing. To make a 10-kilogram shield, he needed 10 kilograms of metal, plus a bit extra for impurity loss. Second, stamina drain. Summoning the hammer cost energy. Striking cost energy. But the real cost came from imposing his will on the material. Turning a fridge into an ingot was easy. Trying to turn that ingot into a sword required intense visualization and focus. If his mind wandered, the metal would just turn into a shapeless blob. Third, the runes. This was the hardest part. He knew they existed, he could see them in his mind's eye, but inscribing them onto an object required a precise, rhythmic striking pattern. It was like playing a piano, but the keys were molten steel and the music was physics. It was 6 a.m. on a Saturday. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, painting the ocean in hues of orange and purple. Izuku was shirtless, sweating profusely. He had cleared a small circle in the trash, perhaps 10 meters wide. In the center of this clearing, he had built a makeshift workbench out of compressed car chassis blocks. He was trying to make a simple rod. Just a metal rod reinforced with a durability rune. Strike. 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 The rhythm was off. The hammer felt clumsy. Damn it, Izuku cursed, dropping the hammer. It dissolved into motes of light. He leaned against a pile of tires, gasping for air. His hands were blistered. It's too heavy. My body. It can't keep up with the quirk yet. A majestic effort. But your form is terrible. Izuku yelped and spun around, tripping over a tire and falling face first into the sand. Standing atop a pile of crushed refrigerators, silhouetted against the rising sun, was a mountain of a man. All Might? Izuku squeaked, scrambling backward. The hero of heroes laughed, his hands on his hips. I am here. On a morning jog. I happened to spot a young man attacking garbage with a glowing hammer. A very proactive form of community service. All Might leaped down, landing with a thud that shook the sand but somehow didn't disturb the trash. He loomed over Izuku, his signature grin plastering his face. Young man! You are the one from the tunnel. The crystal artisan, I believe the forums are calling you? Izuku flushed red. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. Young Midoriya. All Might gave a thumbs up. I was looking for you, actually. The police report was vague, and I wanted to ensure you suffered no ill effects from the sludge incident. But seeing you pulverizing a pickup truck suggests you are quite hale and hearty. I'm training, Izuku stammered, standing up and brushing sand off his chest. For the UA entrance exam. All Might's smile faltered slightly. He looked around the beach. He saw the small clearing. He saw the neat stack of refined metal ingots on the makeshift table. You intend to clean this entire beach? Yes, Izuku said, his voice firming up. I need the materials. My quirk. It requires raw matter to craft. And I need to build my body up to wield the hammer properly. All Might looked at the boy. He saw the determination in those eyes. It was a familiar look. A look he hadn't seen in a long time. A worthy goal, All Might said. But you said your form was off. May I? Izuku nodded dumbly. All Might gestured to the hammer's absence. Summon it. Izuku concentrated. Flash. The hammer appeared. Hold it, All Might instructed. No, not like a baseball bat. It's a tool, but it's also an extension of your spine. Widen your stance. Engage your hips. All Might poked Izuku's side. Your core is soft. The power doesn't come from the arm. It comes from the ground, up through the legs, twisted by the waist, and delivered by the arm. Izuku adjusted his stance. He felt the difference immediately. The weight distribution shifted from his straining shoulder to his legs. Now, All Might commanded. Strike that microwave. Izuku swung. He twisted his hips. The hammer moved faster, with less drag. Clang. The microwave dissolved instantly, reforming into a dense brick of metal. Better! All Might cheered. But you are still weak. You have the spirit, young Midoriya, and you have a fascinating power. But your vessel is fragile. If you push too much power through a thin wire, it melts. All Might suddenly turned away, coughing violently. A spray of blood hit the sand. All Might? Izuku dropped the hammer, rushing forward. Steam erupted from the hero's body. The massive, chiseled form seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon. The golden hair drooped. The muscles vanished. When the steam cleared, a skeletal, gaunt man with sunken eyes stood in the crater of the hero's footprints, wiping blood from his mouth. Izuku froze. His brain short-circuited. What? Who? Where did All Might go? Are you an imposter? Did you eat him? The skeleton man sighed, slumping onto a nearby tire. I am All Might, kid, the pact. 10 minutes later, Izuku sat on the sand, listening with rapt attention as All Might, Toshinori Yagi, explained the truth. The injury. The respiratory system destruction. The time limit. So, All Might wheezed, the symbol of peace is really just a guy trying to suck in his gut and smile through the pain. Izuku stared at him. Most people would be disillusioned. They would see the weakness and lose faith. Izuku saw something else. You. Izuku whispered. You do all that, with half a stomach and one lung? All Might blinked. Well, yes, that's... Izuku's eyes welled up. That's so cool. All Might choked on air. Cool? I look like a stiff breeze could knock me over. No! Izuku insisted. You're hurt, but you still save everyone. You're still the strongest. That's amazing. All Might looked at the boy. Really looked at him. He had been searching for a successor for One for All. He had come to this town looking for a candidate. He looked at Izuku's hands, scarred from the hammer, calloused from the work. He looked at the strange, magical ingots stacked on the table. This boy had his own power, a power that was clearly potent and growing. He didn't need One for All, but he needed a guide. Young Midoriya, All Might said, standing up and transforming into his buff form for a brief moment of dramatic effect. I have a proposal. You aim for Yue. You aim to clear this beach. I cannot be your teacher in the official sense, but I can spot you. Spot me? Weightlifting humor. All Might laughed, deflating again. I will supervise your training. I will help you build the vessel capable of holding that celestial forge of yours. I'll write you a meal plan, a workout schedule. We will turn this beach into your workshop, and we will turn you into a hero. Izuku stood up. He bowed so low his head almost hit the sand. Thank you, All Might. I won't let you down. Month 3, the foundation. The beach became their sanctuary. The training was hell. All Might wasn't a gentle coach. He had Izuku hauling safes upstairs, sprinting through deep sand while carrying tires, and doing plyometrics until Izuku couldn't feel his legs. But the real magic happened in the forge time. Izuku had cleared enough space to build a structure. Using his quirk, he had fused car hoods and sheet metal into a large, dome-shaped hut near the seawall. Inside, it wasn't pretty, but it was functional. He had built a physical anvil out of the engine block of a bulldozer, reinforcing it with his quirk until it was harder than diamond. He called it the anchor. He learned that while his spectral hammer did the shaping, heat helped. He built a furnace using heat-resistant tiles from old ovens and fueled it with driftwood and coal he found in the debris. Focus, Midoriya, All Might said, watching from the doorway of the hut. He was eating a bento box Inko had made for him. Visualize the structure. Izuku stood at the anvil. He was shirtless, his muscles more defined now, sweat glistening on his skin. He held a glowing red bar of steel with tongs in his left hand. He had made the tongs himself. In his right hand, the celestial hammer hummed. I'm trying to make a weave, Izuku gritted out. Flexible but impact-resistant. He struck. Clang, thrum, hiss. The metal flattened. Izuku struck again, but this time he visualized the molecular bonds twisting, locking into a chain-link pattern at the microscopic level. Rune fluidity. A pale blue symbol etched itself into the metal, glowing for a second before fading into the steel. The bar of metal suddenly went limp, draping over the anvil like a piece of silk. I did it! Izuku cheered, holding up the cloth metal. Steel weave cloth. Impressive, All Might noted, stepping closer to inspect it. He touched it. It felt like heavy denim, but when he tried to tear it, it was unyielding. You could make a bodysuit out of this. That's the plan, Izuku grinned. But first, I need a weapon. Or a tool. Month 6, the artificer's mind. The beach was half cleared. The locals were starting to notice. People had begun stopping by the railing above to watch the beach boy work. Some even cheered him on, but Izuku was currently stuck. He sat in his workshop, surrounded by failed prototypes. The problem, Izuku muttered to himself, chewing on the end of a pen, is range and propulsion. He looked at his analysis notebook. My hammer is strong, but it's melee only. If I fight a villain like the sludge guy again, I need to be able to hit without getting grabbed. I need mobility. He looked at his own legs. He was fast, but not Ida fast. He wasn't Bakugo fast. I can't modify my body directly with runes. Izuku had discovered that the hard way. Trying to etch a strength rune onto his skin just caused a nasty burn and a headache. Living tissue resisted the forge, so I need armor. Exoskeleton? He sketched a design. Gauntlets. Boots. If I etch a kinetic rune onto a plate, it stores energy. When I hit something, it releases it. He grabbed a piece of scrap paper. Rune combination, impact vector. If I put this on a gauntlet, and I punch, the impact shouldn't just hurt. It should create a directional shockwave. He looked at the pile of high-grade materials he had been hoarding. He had found a stash of copper piping and an old motorcycle engine with titanium valves. Time to upgrade, Izuku smiled. Month 9, the masterpiece. Winter had come and gone. The beach was unrecognizable. The mountains of trash were gone, replaced by pristine white sand and the sparkling ocean. The only thing remaining was Izuku's workshop, which had grown into a small fortress of scrap metal art. All Might stood by the water, shivering slightly in the cold wind. He checked his watch. He's been in there for 12 hours, All Might muttered. Inko is going to kill me. Suddenly, the door to the workshop hissed open. Steam billowed out into the cool air. Izuku stepped out. All Might's eyes widened. The boy was different. He stood at 170 centimeters now, having grown into his frame. His shoulders were broad, his arms corded with functional muscle built from hauling tons of steel. His face had lost its baby fat, replaced by the sharp angles of focus. But it was what he was wearing that caught All Might's attention. On his forearms, Izuku wore a pair of heavy, dark gray metal gauntlets. They were bulky, extending from his knuckles to his elbows. They looked industrial, rough, with exposed piping and vents, but etched into the metal were glowing blue lines, pulsing softly like veins of light. On his legs, he wore matching greaves, heavy boots that looked like they could kick through a bank vault. Young Midoriya, All Might said. Is that support item Alpha? Izuku said, his voice tired but proud. I call them the Astral Gauntlets and Star-Stride Greaves. He held up his right hand. He made a fist. The chink. Plates on the gauntlet shifted, locking into place. The blue light intensified. Do you want to see? Izuku asked. By all means, All Might grinned. Show me the fruits of your labor. Izuku turned toward the ocean. He crouched low. Rune activation, velocity. The boots flared with white light. Boom. Sand exploded where Izuku stood. He was gone. All Might whipped his head around. Izuku was 50 meters out in the water, running on top of the waves. He's modifying the surface tension? All Might gasped. Izuku skidded to a halt on a large floating piece of driftwood he had left as a target. Rune activation, impact. Izuku drew his fist back. The gauntlet hissed, venting steam. The blue light turned blinding white. He punched the air. He didn't even touch the wood. Cracked Ichom. A shockwave of pressurized air, visible as a distortion ripple, shot from his fist. It hit the driftwood and obliterated it. Splinters flew like shrapnel. The water behind the wood blasted backward, creating a geyser 10 meters high. The recoil sent Izuku flipping backward, but he landed gracefully on the water's surface, sliding back toward the beach. He stepped onto the sand, steam rising from his gauntlets. The lights dimmed. Izuku looked at All Might, a massive, blinding smile on his face. It works. All Might was silent for a moment. He looked at the boy who, 10 months ago, couldn't look him in the eye. He looked at the beach, now clean and beautiful. He looked at the terrifyingly advanced Magitech strapped to the boy's arms. Holy Starlight, All Might whispered. Then he laughed. A full, booming belly laugh. Young Midoriya! You are ready! The day before the exam, the workshop was being dismantled. Izuku couldn't leave it there. It was technically illegal construction, even if the city was turning a blind eye because he cleaned the beach. He transmuted the walls into neat ingots to be stored in his room, which was now more of a warehouse than a bedroom. Izuku stood on the seawall, looking at the sunset. All Might stood beside him. You've done it, All Might said softly. You cleared the whole thing. And you built yourself into a warrior. I couldn't have done it without you, Izuku said. He looked at his hands. You taught me how to work. How to push past the limit. You did the work, All Might corrected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I have a graduation present. Izuku took the box. He opened it. Inside was a small, high-quality metal insignia. It wasn't the UA logo. It was a hammer and anvil, crossed over a star. I had a friend in the support industry make that custom, All Might said. A symbol for a new kind of hero. The artificer. Izuku ran his thumb over the cold metal. Thank you. Tomorrow is the exam, All Might said, looking toward the city. You'll be up against kids with powerful quirks. Telekinesis. Explosions. Engines. Izuku summoned his hammer. It materialized instantly now, no lag, no strain. It floated by his side eager. Let them come, Izuku said. He tapped his astral gauntlets together, the sound of metal on metal ringing out clearly. They have powers, Izuku said, his eyes locking onto the horizon. But I have a forge. And I've got a lot of crafting to do, All Might smiled. He didn't need to worry. The boy wasn't looking for validation anymore. He was looking for raw materials, and UA High was about to provide the biggest testing ground he could ask for. The entrance to UA High was less a gate and more a declaration of intent. 2 massive pillars of steel and glass rose into the sky, framing a campus that looked more like a futuristic fortress than a high school. For thousands of students, this gate was the barrier between mediocrity and greatness. It was the threshold of dreams. For Izuku Midoriya, standing at the base of the steps with his yellow backpack slung over one shoulder, it was something else entirely. He adjusted his glasses, not that he needed them for vision anymore, the Runeforge having sharpened his eyesight to eagle-like precision, but they helped hide the faint, passive glow of his irises when he got excited. He looked at the gate, reinforced titanium alloy plating over a concrete core, his mind supplied unbidden. Sensor arrays embedded in the archway every 3 meters. Stress distribution focused on the central pylons. I could destabilize the entire structure by removing 3 bolts on the eastern hinge. He shook his head, dispelling the intrusive architectural analysis. Stop trying to seize the school, Izuku. You're here to enroll, not dismantle. He took a deep breath. The air tasted crisp, electric. It was the day of the entrance exam. 10 months. It had been 10 months since the sludge incident. 10 months of eating like a starving wolf, sleeping like the dead, and working like a machine on Dagoba Beach. His body, once scrawny and fragile, was now a dense network of compacted muscle and reinforced bone. He felt heavy, grounded, like a walking anchor. Out of my way, Deku. The voice was low, gravelly, and laced with the scent of nitroglycerin. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't jump or stutter. He simply shifted his weight, turning smoothly to face Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo stopped. He had expected the flinch. He had expected the fear. Instead, he was met with a calm, analytical gaze that seemed to be measuring the tensile strength of his jawline. Good morning, Kakin, Izuku said, his voice steady. Ready for the exam? Bakugo's eyes narrowed. He sensed a change. He had seen the clean beach. Everyone had. But he refused to believe Deku was responsible. It had to be a trick. Don't think just because you cleaned up some trash that you're on my level, Bakugo spat, shouldering past him. I'm not just going to pass. I'm going to set a record that will never be broken. Don't stand in my blast zone, or you'll get vaporized. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku replied pleasantly. Bakugo paused, looking back over his shoulder with a scowl of confusion, before scoffing and marching toward the building. Izuku watched him go. His gait is aggressive, leaning forward. Center of gravity is low. If I had to counter him, a kinetic redirection rune on a shield would be best. Let his own momentum do the work. Oh! It's you! Izuku turned. A girl with a round face and bobbed brown hair was jogging up to him. It was the girl he had saved from tripping, well, almost tripping, at the gate earlier. You're the one who caught me! She beamed. I was so nervous I almost ate pavement. Thanks for the assist. It was no problem, Izuku smiled. Gravity shift, right? I saw the pads on your fingertips. Emitter type? Yeah. Zero gravity. She chirped, then looked at him curiously. You seem super calm. I'm about to throw up my breakfast. I'm Achiko Uraraka, by the way. Izuku Midoriya. Well, good luck, Midoriya. Let's do our best. She pumped a fist and ran off toward the orientation hall. Izuku looked at his hands. Do our best. He clenched his fist. The phantom weight of the hammer pulsed in his palm. I'm not here to do my best. I'm here to build a future. The written exam. The written portion was, surprisingly, relaxing. The questions covered standard subjects, math, English, history, but also hero law and quirk ethics. For most students, the physics questions were a nightmare of calculations. For Izuku, they were intuitive. Question 14. Calculate the structural load of a bridge made of reinforced steel if a villain with a gigantification quirk, approximate 20 tons, stands on the central span. Izuku didn't just do the math. He visualized the bridge in his mind. He saw the vectors of force as glowing blue lines. He saw the compression of the steel lattice. The steel isn't the problem, he thought, scribbling furiously. The problem is the resonance frequency. If the villain moves, the vibration will shear the bolts before the weight collapses the span. He wrote down the standard answer, then added a footnote. Note: adding a dampening field or using a flexible alloy like titanium weave would increase load tolerance by 40%. He breezed through the test. His mind, now attuned to the fundamental building blocks of reality, found patterns in the logic questions that others missed. It wasn't just intelligence. It was the perspective of an architect looking at a blueprint. The orientation. Everybody say hey. Present Mick's voice boomed through the auditorium, amplified by his quirk to ear-shattering levels. Izuku sat in the middle rows, his notebook open. While other students were getting hyped or overwhelmed, Izuku was sketching. Welcome to my live show. Everybody say hey. Silence. Keeping it cool? I dig it. Mike continued unfazed. Now listen up, listeners. We're gonna test your mettle in a 10-minute mock city battle. You can bring whatever gear you want, as long as it's registered. After this, you head to your specified battle centers. The screen behind him lit up, displaying silhouettes of robots. There are 3 types of foe villains in every center. You earn points based on their difficulty level. 1-pointer, 2-pointer, and the big bad 3-pointer. Use your quirks to disable them and rack up that score. Izuku tapped his pen against the paper. Disable. Not destroy. That means mobility kills count. Or cutting the power supply. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A hand shot up in the front row. A tall boy with glasses and a stiff posture stood up. The spotlight hit him. There appear to be no fewer than 4 types of villains on this handout. The boy shouted, pointing at the pamphlet. Such a blatant error on the materials of Japan's top academy is shameful. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. And you, he whipped around to point directly at Izuku. The curly-haired student. You've been muttering and scribbling this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here on a sightseeing trip, you should leave immediately. The auditorium went quiet. Eyes turned to Izuku. 10 months ago, Izuku would have shrunk into his seat, apologizing profusely. Now, Izuku stood up. I'm sorry if I distracted you, Izuku said, his voice calm and carrying surprisingly well without shouting. I was taking notes on the structural weaknesses of the robots shown on screen. As for the 4th robot, he looked at Present Mike. It's a gimmick, isn't it? An obstacle. In game design, you don't just have enemies, you have environmental hazards. The 4th robot isn't a target, it's a natural disaster. Present Mike grinned, adjusting his shades. Bingo. That listener gets it. The fourth robot is the 0-pointer. It's massive, it's mean, and it's worth exactly 0 points. It's an obstacle meant to be avoided. If you see it, run. The boy with glasses, Ida, blinked, looking between present Mike and Izuku. A hazard? I see. Thank you for the clarification. And my apologies. He bowed stiffly and sat down. Izuku sat back down, ignoring the whispers around him. Did he say structural weaknesses? Who is that guy? Bakugo, sitting a few rows ahead, sked. Damn nerd. Battle Center B. The changing rooms were a flurry of activity. Students were strapping on pads, checking support items, and stretching. Izuku stood by his locker, opening a heavy, reinforced carrying case. Inside lay his life's work. He pulled on the black, fireproof undersuit. It was made of the steel-weave fabric he had invented, flexible but tough enough to stop a knife. Then came the armor. He strapped the star-striped greaves onto his legs. They clicked and hissed as the pneumatic seals engaged. The metal was a matte gunmetal gray, etched with angular runes that currently lay dormant. Next, the astral gauntlets. He slid his arms into them. They were heavy, encompassing his forearms and hands. The fingers were articulated plates of titanium alloy, sensitive enough to hold a pencil but strong enough to crush a rock. He tapped a small studs on the wrist. VRRM. A low, deep hum emanated from the gear. Thin lines of blue light traced the runes, pulsing softly. Whoa, a student nearby with spiky red hair, Kirishima said, staring. Are those support items? That's manly as hell. Thanks, Izuku said, checking the calibration. I made them myself. You made them? Kirishima's eyes went wide. Dude, that's insane. I'm Eijiro Kirishima. Let's crush this, Izuku Midoriya. Let's do it. They walked out to the staging area. It was a massive urban replica, a city block with tall buildings, paved streets, and streetlights. Izuku scanned the crowd. He saw Uraraka looking nervous, trying to calm her breathing. He considered going over to wish her luck, but he saw the stiff boy Ida, blocking the way, looking like he was about to lecture someone on focus. Focus, Izuku told himself. Don't get distracted. He walked to the front of the gate. He knelt down, touching the asphalt. Composition, standard asphalt concrete. High friction. Gauntlet setting, velocity. He tapped the side of his boots with his hammer, which he had just summoned. The spectral weapon floated by his hip, tethered to him by an invisible magnetic field. And start. Present Mick's voice screamed from a tower above. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 The crowd hesitated for a split second, confused. Izuku did not. The moment the word start registered, Izuku triggered the runes on his greaves. Rune velocity burst. Blue fire erupted from the vents on the back of his calves. Boom! He didn't run. He launched. He was a blur of gray and blue, tearing past the other students before they had even taken their first step. He hit the main street of the mock city doing 60 kilometers per hour, his boots skimming just millimeters above the ground on a cushion of pressurized air and mana. Whoa! Look at him go! Izuku ignored the voices. He was in the zone. He rounded the first corner and found them. 3 one-pointers. They were tracked vehicles with humanoid torsos, armed with rubber bullet machine guns. Target acquired, the lead robot droned. It raised its gun. Izuku didn't slow down. He didn't dodge. He reached out with his right hand, the astral gauntlet glowing. He grabbed the barrel of the gun as he rushed past. He didn't pull. He transmuted. Rune brittle. A flash of blue light. The steel barrel of the gun turned into rusted, flaky iron in an instant. The robot fired, and the barrel exploded, backfiring into the robot's face. Izuku spun, his momentum carrying him into the middle of the group. He grabbed the hammer floating at his hip. Dismantle! He struck the chassis of the second robot. Clang! He didn't smash it. He struck the concept of its assembly. The bolts holding the chassis together simply popped out. The armor plates fell off like shedding skin. The robot collapsed into a pile of spare parts. The third robot lunged. Izuku sidestepped, inscribing a heavy rune on its tread. The tread suddenly weighed 10 tons. The robot lurched, the axle snapped, and it flipped over, incapacitating itself. 6 points, Izuku counted, not even stopping to look back. He fired his boot thrusters and rocketed down the street. Observation room. In a darkened room filled with screens, the teachers of UA watched. This year's crop is energetic, Midnight purred, watching Bakugo blow up a robot with a maniacal grin. There is a lot of raw power, Cementos agreed. But look at this one. Battle Center B. He pointed to a screen. It showed Izuku Midoriya drifting around a corner, creating a wall of scrap metal to block a 2-pointer's laser, then turning that wall into a spear to skewer the robot's power core. Midoriya Izuku Nizu, the principal, said, sipping tea. Registered quirk, Celestial Runeforge. A mutation-type reality warper focused on crafting. He fights like an engineer, Power Loader said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming behind his helmet. He's not just destroying them, he's harvesting them. Look, he just ripped the sensor array off a 3-pointer and fused it to his shoulder. On screen, Izuku had indeed jury-rigged a radar dish to his pauldron. He's adapting in real time, Aizawa muttered, his eyes narrowed. He relies on equipment, but he creates the equipment on the fly. It's resourceful. But? All Might asked, sitting in the back, trying to look small. Stamina, Aizawa pointed out. Look at his movement. He's slowing down. That much transmutation burns calories and mental focus fast. If he doesn't pace himself, he'll burn out before the end. The battlefield, 8 minutes in, Izuku was panting. His lungs burned. The sweat under his suit was soaking him. 42 points, he gasped, smashing a 2-pointer's head with his hammer. He was feeling the drain. Every time he struck with the intention to change matter, it took a piece of his energy. His stomach growled ferociously. Note to self, pack energy bars in the gauntlets next time. He looked around. The city was a war zone. Explosions echoed from the next block. Bakugo, probably. Ice covered a building to the north. Todoroki? No, he was a recommended student, he wasn't here. Izuku wiped his forehead. I have enough points to pass, probably. But I should get a few more to be safe. He jogged, no more thrusters, saving fuel, toward the central plaza. Suddenly, the ground shook. It wasn't an explosion. It was an earthquake. Thump, thump. Dust rose from the north end of the city. A shadow fell over the streets, blotting out the sun. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. It was the 0-pointer. It was colossal. A monstrosity of green metal the size of a skyscraper. Its hand was the size of a bus. Its red eyes glowed with menacing intent. What the? Izuku whispered. That's not a robot. That's a mobile fortress. The robot punched the ground. A shockwave tore through the street, shattering windows and cracking the pavement. Buildings crumbled. Run! It's the 0-pointer! Screw this! Students stampeded past Izuku, their faces pale with terror. Even the confident ones were retreating. It was an impossible enemy. A force of nature. Izuku took a step back. His instincts screamed at him to run. Logically, there is no gain. It's worth 0 points. Survival is the priority. He turned to follow the crowd. Ow! A cry of pain. Faint buried under the sound of crumbling masonry. Izuku froze. His new sensor array, the one he had welded to his shoulder, picked up a heat signature. He turned back. Through the dust, he saw her. Uraraka. She was trapped under a pile of rubble. A massive slab of concrete had pinned her leg. She was struggling, coughing, trying to float the rock, but she was exhausted. The 0-pointer was moving. Its massive tracks were grinding the street to dust. It was heading right for her. No. Izuku whispered. Logic said run. Logic said a teacher would intervene. Logic said he was tired. His mana was low, and his hammer felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. But the forge in his chest didn't run on logic. It ran on fire. A hero doesn't wait for the right conditions. Izuku's body moved before his brain gave the command. He didn't run away. He ran toward the Titan. Midoriya! Don't! Ida shouted from the safety of an alleyway. It's suicide. Izuku didn't hear him. His eyes were locked on the robot's descending fist. It was going to crush the area where Uraraka lay. He reached Uraraka. She looked up, eyes wide with tear-filled fear. Run! She screamed. Not without you! Izuku grunted. He tried to lift the slab. It was too heavy for his physical strength alone, and he didn't have time to transmute it. The shadow deepened. The robot's fist was falling. Izuku looked up. I can't punch that away. I'm not All Might. I don't have one for all. I'm an artificer. If I can't break it, I have to weather it. Izuku slammed his hands onto the ground. He reached out with his quirk, not to the air, but to the wreckage around him. Gather! He roared. Blue light exploded from his body, brighter than it had ever been. The rubble, the destroyed one-pointers, the shattered concrete, the rebar, the street lamps, all of it responded to his call. It flew toward him, swirling in a vortex of metal and stone. Fuse! Izuku slammed his hands together, clapping with a thunderous sound. The debris slammed together above him and Uraraka. It melted, twisted, and locked. In a fraction of a second, the trash transformed. It became a shield. A massive, curved dome of jagged, multicolored metal, easily 10 meters wide. It looked like a tortoise shell made of urban warfare. But a physical shield wasn't enough. The zero-pointer weighed thousands of tons. It would crush the metal. Izuku grabbed his hammer. He channeled everything he had left. Every calorie. Every drop of mana. He struck the inside of his own shield. Clang. Rune, absolute reflection. The rune he inscribed wasn't blue. It was gold. A masterwork rune. The robot's fist made contact. Boom. The sound was deafening. The ground around Izuku cratered, sinking 3 feet. Uraraka screamed, covering her head, but the shield held. The fist hit the dome. The kinetic energy traveled into the metal, seeking to crush it. But the rune caught it. It took that downward force, multiplied it by the tensile stress of the alloy, and reversed the vector. Reject! Izuku screamed, blood pouring from his nose. A beam of golden light shot upward from the shield's surface. The zero-pointer's arm didn't just stop. It was blasted backward. The recoil rippled up the robot's arm, blowing out its hydraulic pistons. The metal of the robot's limb crumpled like paper. The massive giant was thrown off balance. It tilted backward, its internal gyroscopes failing under the shock of its own reflected power. With a groan of twisting metal, the zero-pointer crashed onto its back, shaking the entire city block. Silence. Dust hung in the air. The shield above Izuku glowed red-hot, then shattered into dust, its purpose fulfilled. Izuku stood there, swaying. His gauntlets were smoking. His hammer flickered and vanished. He looked down at Uraraka. She was staring at him as if he were a god. Are you? Izuku wheezed, his vision tunneling. Are you okay? Uraraka stammered. Good, Izuku whispered. His eyes rolled back in his head. He pitched forward, face planting into the concrete. The aftermath. 1 minute left. Present Mike announced, though his voice lacked its usual gusto. He was staring at the monitor in the booth, jaw dropped. In the observation room, silence reigned. He created a kinetic reflection barrier from scrap in 0.4 seconds, Power Loader whispered, tapping his tablet frantically. The structural integrity was impossible. He rewrote the density of the steel. He saved the girl, All Might said, his voice thick with emotion. He was gripping the armrests of his chair so hard they had turned to powder. He didn't run. He stood his ground against the god and forced it to kneel. Aizawa watched the screen where Recovery Girl was already making her way toward the fallen boy. He has zero self-preservation, Aizawa noted. But he has potential. Battle Center B Ground Zero. Izuku woke up to the feeling of something soft hitting his head. Here, Sonny. Chew on these. Izuku blinked. A small old lady in a lab coat, Recovery Girl, was handing him a handful of gummy bears. Our Recovery Girl? Izuku croaked. You overdid it, she scolded, though her tone was gentle. Severe mana exhaustion. Muscle fatigue. And you cracked 2 ribs from the pressure of holding that shield. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. Smooch. A wave of warmth washed over him. His breathing eased. The pain in his chest faded to a dull ache. That will speed up the healing, but it will make you tired, she said. Eat the gummies. You need the sugar. Izuku chewed obediently. He looked around. The zero-pointer lay defeated in the distance, smoke rising from its ruined arm. Students were gathering around, whispering, "Did you see that? He blocked the zero-pointer. Who is he?" Ida walked up. He looked at the robot, then at Izuku. His face was a mask of shock and shame. Ida started, adjusting his glasses. "I misjudged you. I thought you were looking for trouble. But you saw the true nature of the test." "True nature?" Izuku mumbled, sitting up with a groan. "Self-sacrifice," Ida said solemnly. "I ran. You stayed. You are a true hero candidate." Uraraka was there too, her leg bandaged. She offered him a hand. "You saved my life," she said, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Midoriya." Izuku took her hand. Her grip was warm. "Just doing my job." Izuku smiled weakly. He looked at his hands. The astral gauntlets were charred, the runes burned out. They would need major repairs. But he had done it. He hadn't just passed the test. He had proven his hypothesis. "I don't need to be the strongest puncher," Izuku thought, looking at the fallen giant. "I just need to be the best smith." 1 week later, the letter arrived. Izuku sat at his desk, the holographic projector whirring to life. All Might appeared on the screen, booming with laughter. He broke down the score. Villain points 52. Rescue points 60. "Welcome, Izuku Midoriya," All Might's hologram said, extending a hand. "To your hero academia," Izuku cried. He cried until he was dehydrated. Then, he wiped his eyes, grabbed a screwdriver, and pulled his burnt gauntlet onto the desk. "Okay," Izuku whispered, a new fire in his eyes. "Time to upgrade." The door to Class 1A was massive. It stood nearly 4 meters tall, a looming slab of reinforced polymer and steel meant to accommodate students with gigantification quirks or mutations that defied standard.